Hey guys, welcome back. Today we will be covering Booleans, if and else statements, and types of errors. And at the end of the lesson, we will create a really fun program, and I'm going to teach you how to create a computer friend that you can talk to in quarantine. If you did your homework from our last lesson, here's the solution for that, so pause and check your work. In the previous lesson, we briefly talked about what Booleans are, so let's get in a little bit more detail about how they work. So a Boolean is a primitive variable that stores true or false values. After variables are initialized, they're automatically assigned a value. We didn't really talk about this in the previous lesson, but if you don't put an equal sign in front of your variable and just end it with a semicolon, your variable will technically still have an initial value stored in it until you equate it to a value that you want. So Booleans are automatically assigned a value of false. Int and double, on the other hand, are assigned a value of 0, and char and string are assigned to a value of null. But this isn't recommended. It's best to assign the value that you want to your variable. So if you want to create a Boolean, you can do Boolean and then the name of the variable that you want equals true or equals false. And this line over here, you can use it when you want to see if an action was done in your program. We will be using Booleans in another example with our next topic, which is if and else statements. So if and else statements are conditional statements. An if statement executes when a specific condition is true, and then if that condition is not true, then we will have an else statement. So basically, you will have, so if my condition is true, and I will put my condition over here in the brackets, execute the blocks of code that I'm entering in between these curly brackets, otherwise execute the code that I have over here. Or you can also use an else if statement, which tests out an entirely new condition, and then it first checks the if statement. If that's not true, it will go to the else if statement, and then if that's true, it will execute the block of code that you have entered. Or if it's not true, the compiler will skip those lines of code. So these conditions that you're putting inside of your if and else statements can be specified using the usual mathematical logical conditions, but these comparisons only work on primitive variable types. So you can do less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. If you want to say equal to, you'll have to have double equal sign. Not equal to would be exclamation mark and then an equal sign. Or you can also combine your conditions together with and or, as shown over here. Or if you want to see if a condition is not true, you can add an exclamation mark before it. So let's try out a program that uses all the knowledge that we've gained today to see how the Booleans and the if statements work. So here I have a program, it's called Boolean exercise. I've made my scanner and then I've declared 3 variables. So I haven't yet assigned them to a value, which means that they're automatically false, but I can assign them to a value that I want over here, as shown over here. Okay, so you can also declare your variables on separate lines. So you can say Boolean greater, Boolean less, or you can just have them on the same line as I had before, but just make sure that they all have the same type if you want to do that. If they don't have the same type, then I will just declare it separately, like the number that I have over here, and then I'm going to get some input from the user and store it in my number. So now we get to our if and else statements. So first we have to have an if statement because you can't have an else statement in the beginning since it's checking the one before it. So let's start with an if statement, and then we're going to see if our number is less than 0. If it is, we will execute this line of code over here. If it's not, it will go to our else if statement, which is if our number is less than or equal to 10. So our number was not less than 0, and now we're checking if it's less than or equal to 10, which logically will tell us that our number is between 0 and 10. And then if both of these conditions that we had before are false, then it will go to our else statement, which means that our number is greater than 10. And then we can have an entirely separate if statement, which is independent of the statements that we had before, since it doesn't have an else before it, and it will check if either of these conditions are true. So if at least one of them is true, then it will output this message. So let's try that out. So let's say we enter a number and it's -10. What will happen? So it will tell us that, well, our number is less than 10, so that means this line will be executed over here, and all of the other ones will be ignored since our first condition was true. and then it will go to the next if statement, and that will check if greater is equal to true or less is equal to true, and then it will tell us that our number is not a number from 0 to 10. So let's try that out with 50. So we'll first go over here. Our number is not less than 0, so it goes to the next condition. Our number is not less than or equal to 10, so it goes to the next condition, and then it will say that our number is greater than 10. And then it will go to our next if statement and then checks it, and then we will see that our number is not a number between 0 and 10. So now that we know how Booleans and if statements work, let's try to do them with strings. Since, as I mentioned before, the comparisons that we had, they only work with primitive types. So if you want to compare strings together, it's going to be a little bit more tricky. So before, when we wanted to see if two things are equal, we used a double equal sign. But if you want to compare two strings, you will have to do your first string dot equals your second string. But when we have strings and when we have words, they can be uppercase or lowercase. So let's say you have a string that says hello in all caps and another one that says hello in all lowercase. And you just want to have a program that sees if your message says hello, regardless of whether it's in caps or not. So then you would use this method over here, which is your first string dot equals ignore case your second string. And if you want to compare your two strings alphabetically, you can use dot compared to. This method returns 0 if your two strings are equal, returns a negative result if your first string comes before in the alphabet, and then it returns a positive result if your first string comes after your second string in the alphabet. So next we're going to talk about errors. We have 3 different types of errors. The first one is a compile time error. So the compiler, before you run your program, your compiler checks to make sure that you're using the correct syntax. Your syntax is how you write your statements. It's basically like your grammar. So a syntax error occurs when you have incorrect syntax, such as making spelling mistakes, or having punctuation errors, or if you're missing a semicolon, an equal sign, a double equal sign, or any of your brackets. So in this example over here, it outputs a red message to you, and it will actually tell you which line your error comes from. So over here it's in line 7, and we see that it says if num equals 8. Well, that's not correct, since if we want to see if it's equal to 8, we will have to have a double equal sign. So to fix that, we can just refer to that line and fix the mistake that we had. Another type of error that we have are runtime errors. These errors occur when your program is being executed, and it happens when your program suddenly crashes or has to terminate abnormally. This happens when you're trying to do something in your program that the computer can't do, like dividing a number by 0. We also have another type of error, and they're called logical errors. So this is when your program compiles and runs without any complaints, so it doesn't output that scary red message to you. But then the result that it outputs to you is actually not the one that you were expecting. So this can happen when you are calculating a value incorrectly, or you're using a wrong formula, or you took a wrong approach. So in order to fix this problem, you have to run your program with a lot of different test cases, just test it with a lot of different values, and you have to just run through it line by line and see where the mistake is. So now we will write another program. I've called it Quarantine Friend, and we're gonna basically combine all the knowledge that we've gained today from the strings and the if and else statements to make ourselves a computer friend. So first of all, what our computer friend will do is that it will output a message to us that says, "Hi, I'm your quarantine friend." So once we have outputted this message, on a separate line, we can ask the user a question. So system.out.println, and then we can ask them a question that says, "Are you bored today?" And our answer will be a string. Let's call it word string, and then it will store the next word that the user enters. And then we want to see if this board string that we have inputted is equal to yes or no. So let's first tell our user that we only want them to say yes or no. So if they say yes, so dot equals ignore case yes, we're going to ignore the case since it really doesn't matter if they type yes in lower or uppercase. So if board string dot equals ignore case yes, we will have a boolean, and let's call it board. At first it's set to false, and then we have board equals true. So then if the user that we have is bored, so that would be bored equals true, or you can just type if bored. That only works with booleans. So if bored, let's output another message. So we want to find out more about our friends so that we can help them with their boredom problem. So let's say, do you like dancing? Once we ask this message, we can input another string. So it's better to declare all of our variables at the top of our program. So let's just do that. String, dance, string, and then we'll have another boolean, and we'll call that dance. So then our string, and we call the dance string, is equal to sc.next, so that it outputs the yes or no that we want. And then if the result that we get is yes, oh, that's not allowed, dot equals ignore case yes, then we will set dance to true. And then we can also ask them another question. How about we ask them, do you like watching movies? And then we will have another string to store the answer for that. So that's going to be string movie string, and then a boolean to store that in. Alright, so then we will store that in our string, which we called movie string. So that would be equal to sc.next. And then if our string is equal to yes, dot equals ignore case yes, then we will set our movie to true. Alright, so let's initially set our movie and our dance to false. And then over here we can be like, if they like to dance, we can tell them that you should make a TikTok. Yay! And then if they like to watch a movie, we can tell them that you should binge some shows and movies on Netflix. Alright, so since we don't have an else condition over here, it will output both of these based on whether any of them are true. So what would happen if they said no to both of our conditions over there? So then that would mean that we can have an else condition. Actually, I think if we have an else condition over here, it will be better. And then we can just be like, because if we recommend just one thing to them, it'll be nicer. So otherwise, we can just tell them, well, how about yay, Okay. And then we can ask our friend a bunch of questions like, what's your name? And then we can store their name. And then, so our friend is called Quarantine Friend. So let's compare the name that they entered to our name. So, we will do an if statement and we'll say name dot compare to quarantine friend. And if it's larger than 0, then that means that it will come after. So we'll just say that message to them. Your name comes after my name in the alphabet. And then we can just keep doing that. So else, if their name, and we compare it to the quarantine friend, we can write that your name comes before. And then we'll have a last condition for when their two names are equal. And then we can write, we have the same name. All right, let's see if we have any errors by running our program. Oh, we do. So let's just see where they are. It's on line 21. What mistake did we make? Oh, we forgot a semicolon. So that's a compile time error, and we didn't have the correct syntax. So let's just run it again to see if we have any more errors. Seems all right. So are you bored today? Yes. Do you like dancing? No. Do you like watching movies? Yes. And then it gives us that message over there. Let's run it one more time and try out a different answer. Are you bored today? Yes. Do you like dancing? No. Do you like watching movies? No. What has happened? How about we get to know each other? What's your name? Oh, we haven't entered a name yet. What seems to be the problem? So, since our program compiled and ran, but didn't give us the answer that we wanted, that means that we have a logic error. So let's just see where that could be. So the problem is after it asks for our name. So what's your name? And then string name equals sc dot next line. Why does that not work? Oh, and now it works. So we can say my name is Codehax. And then it says that your name comes before my name. Well, that's perfect. Now, the reason that wasn't working is because the time before we inputted dot next, and the scanner might have been still on that same line. So if we just scan the next line and we ignore, like we don't store it in anything, then it should work, and it worked fine this time. So let's return to our presentation. So for your homework, prompt the user for an integer, check if the integer is even or odd, and tell the user that the number is even or odd. Prompt the user for a name, check if the name is Bob, ignoring the upper and lower cases, and then tell the user if the name is Bob or if it is not Bob. So thank you for joining us for our lesson today. Subscribe to be updated on our weekly lessons.